Hi everyone, Paul Varian here from Capitalist Consulting. I hope you're keeping well. Guess what? Are we allowed to actually start talking about this pandemic finally running its course and reaching its end? I'm starting to sense we are, and looking at how you amateur sports clubs and amateur sports organizations are moving forward now into full-on reopening, I'm starting to think you're thinking that's the case too. So let's be positive. Let's talk about the world post-pandemic. And obviously this is going to be great because we're going to finally get back to contemplating and managing the idea of a full season of uninterrupted amateur sport. About time. I'm here to speak to you boards of directors now. It doesn't come without hidden risk. So I'm going to give you now 10 very important hidden risks around the post-pandemic sport world that you need to be watching carefully as a board of directors. I know you're going to be really keen to get back into the sport programming and get back into why you volunteered to be on your sport board in the first place, but you have a duty as the board to look after and manage risk and the welfare of your organization as best as you can. So here's 10 risks that I want you to keep an eye on over the coming months as we move into a post-pandemic sport world. The first one is executive burnout. It's a huge one. If you have executive director, or if you have a technical director or a director of coaching or anyone in a staff leadership position, keep an eye on them very carefully. Talk to them very, very frequently. Be open, supportive, empathetic with them, because believe me, every day I'm speaking to different people in executive leadership in amateur sport, and many of them are close to breaking point, close to burnout, and they're still resigning, even though we've got through this pandemic. The contemplation of reopening with limited resources and the continuing churn of staff that they're feeling is making life very hard for them. They've been through a really tough 2 years, so they are arguably one of your biggest and most important assets, especially as you go into your reopening phase. So watch for executive burnout. It's here and it's real. Number 2, inability to quickly staff up. As your programs are reopening, you probably have to replace staff that you either left or you had to sadly let go during the pandemic, the positions you didn't refill during the pandemic time. Why would you? You weren't programming, you didn't need them. So your staff is probably too small for what you need moving forward. You have to restaff to pre-pandemic 2019 levels, and it's proving very hard to do. It's a big time candidates market out there. There isn't the talent we need. Everyone's looking for it all at the same time, so everyone's going to the well at the same time, often for similar talent. So it's hard to do, and it's taking a long time to do it as well. So be measured in how quickly you believe you can reopen, because the reality is your organization may simply not be able to staff up quickly enough to service the programming intent you have. Number 3, hand in glove with this, skills deficiencies. As we move into a post-pandemic sport world, you're probably going to find there are skill sets that you need moving forward that you didn't need, or maybe were way into the future in your mind in 2019. We've probably got a reasonable sense of them as we've gone through this pandemic period, but it would be naive to assume that your organization's got all the skill sets on board that you need, particularly around technology and remote stuff and digital stuff, that you had before the pandemic or even during it. So again, be measured, be cautious, look at this initial time as a period of consolidation, of bringing your capacity and your associated capability back up to the levels you need, and don't think that'll happen just in a heartbeat like turning a light switch on. Simply won't. Number 4, continued lack of volunteer coaches. This was a problem during the pandemic. I'm sorry to say, from what I'm seeing, it's not going away. These volunteer coaches have disappeared and they're not coming back, a lot of them. We don't know why. It may be due to lifestyle change during the pandemic. It may be due to employment changes during the pandemic. They may have just found other things to do. But the fact is, this enormously important resource of volunteer coaches is not there like it was in 2019. And guess what? It was already deteriorating then. So again, be measured with your programming. You're probably going to have to put a lot more long-term resources and effort into building up your volunteer base that you didn't have to in the past. And you're going to have to be patient with it as well. Number 5, reliance on government-related COVID-19 emergency funds or subsidizations. I've heard a lot of organizations that did a really good job protecting their balance sheets, but that was in large part because the government in many jurisdictions came in and enabled them to protect their balance sheets by subsidizing revenue, or in some cases replacing revenue that would otherwise have come in from programs. Well, guess what? The trapdoor is about to fall out from all that revenue. You're about to have a big revenue hole in your income statement, and your program revenue has to be able to replace that or even supersede it. So that's a big financial risk you've got to be aware of. Just be very careful about how quickly you can commit to major cost without making sure that you are able to replace that government money from the last couple of years. Number 6, governing bodies are also in rebuild. Now, you may not notice that, you may not even care, but you know what? Your governing bodies are pretty important. They obviously run organized sport in a safe, controlled and measured way. They provide a lot of the policies and procedures that you need to run. They often run a lot of your coaching clinics or your match officials clinics or what have you. And they often run the competitions, particularly at regional or state or provincial or national level, that your athletes compete in. So they're an important piece of the system. And I'm here to tell you, they were stripped bare during the pandemic, particularly in some jurisdictions where the lockdowns lasted a lot longer than others. They've got to restaff up, they've got to recapacitate themselves as well. Recapacitate, I might have just made that word up, but it's a good one, so let's keep it, okay? So don't bash your governing bodies, okay? Their leadership is just as tired, as I mentioned in number 1, as your leadership is. Give them a break. Let them bring themselves back up to the capacity where they can provide the membership services you're used to, but make sure that they're in a position that they can do. Number 7, misaligned planning. So you may have strategic plans that were built pre-pandemic or even during the pandemic. Have a good look at them now. Make sure that they are indeed aligned with your strategic intent, with your capacity and capability, with your mission and vision, and what your other stakeholders that you add value to need from you. A lot of organizations I'm working with are either ripping up, throwing away old strat plans that they're in the middle of, or are starting planning processes now. And it's a smart idea because you can build in and write in all the risk post-pandemic into your strategic plan, and all the risk based on how your organization has come through that period into the new plan. There's also new realities. A lot of organizations have gone through a lot of self-discovery through this period of time. They've understood that their value that they thought was over here is in fact over here. They've understood the important role they play in the community. Some have completely rewritten their vision and mission statements through this pandemic. So make sure your planning is aligned. It may be, but do that asset check. As the board, it's your responsibility to do so. Number 8, avoid staying in crisis mode as a board. Now, a lot of you boards have done a great job getting into crisis mode, setting up task force and COVID subcommittees and these subgroups of the board that can manage all the crisis-based stuff that we've had thrown at us during the pandemic. But be very careful you don't leave those committees in place post-pandemic. If they've done their job, wind them up, give them a nice lunch to say thank you, and go back to the proper model of governance, where you have your board governing, a bright red line, and then your staff and management running operations. Don't continue to leave old vestigial committees and task forces of the board that are operational moving forward with your staff. Institutionalize the traditional model of governance. Get back to it, be vigilant about it. Number 9, don't forget what we've learned through this period. We've learned so much. I've been talking a lot through my social feeds about actually what benefits we've achieved in the system through change being forced upon us through this crisis of this pandemic. Some organizations, certainly boards as well, are better off than they were before because we had to do things differently. Don't drop it all and go back to how we were pre-pandemic. If you have to, sit down for an hour with your board and write down what was good out of this, what you want to keep, and write a plan for how you're going to keep it. Institutionalize the good stuff that happened, okay? Very important post-pandemic to not let go of the good stuff. And finally, we can't just look within our organization, we can't just look within our sport, we can't just look within the sport industry at large. We have to think bigger and globally in terms of environmental outlook right now as a sport organization. We are heading for very bleak global economic times, it would appear. Obviously bouncing out of this recession and now this crisis we have in Ukraine and the associated energy market crisis that's coming hand in glove with it, that looks likely to deepen and hang around for a long time. Some economists I'm hearing, you probably are too, are talking not only about recession, but about depression. The last time we had that was 2008. Now, I may hear you say, well, we came out of 2008 okay. As an amateur sport organisation, we did all right. Even though other industries, in the banking industry and the housing industry was collapsing, we've managed to run our club through it, and that's true. Amateur sport, is quite inelastic economically. People don't want to take away the sports programs from their kids. They'll throw away the cruise to the Caribbean and the expensive jewelry and meals out and that kind of thing, but they don't want to take Johnny or Jane out of soccer, right? So it is quite inelastic. However, you've got to understand this recession or depression could be big, long-lasting, and really hit people. So it would be naive to start driving ahead with risky, expensive programming experiments that you haven't tried before, that are contingent on a lot of money coming in to prop them up, when we don't really know where we're going to be economically globally, or even politically globally, in the near to mid future. So just keep that reality in your back pocket as you drive out of this pandemic crisis. So, I know I'm not painting a very happy picture here, but I guess my overall message is, when you look at these 5-10 risks, you'll see that being cavalier about reopening your club and just assuming you're going to be back to 2019 or better is naive, and that's not the way you should act or think as a board. Think continuously, judiciously, be conservative about how you reopen, and consider these risks that are hidden to you that could really knock your club off track as you try to bounce back to how things were before. I hope that has helped you. I do wish you the best. I do look forward to a great year of interruption-free sport ahead. But until then, watch this space. Paul Varian, Capitalist Consulting. Thanks for listening to my list of 10.